why I fight so hard, both in the corporate arena, but also in my own business now, to create access and opportunity, because I know that we all don't start from the same place.
You're listening to Working Forward, a Future of Work focused podcast from People Forward Network. These episodes pave the road ahead, helping us confidently step into the future as a leader who moves people forward. Let's go.
I'm Lori Shakur, and this is Putting the Human Back in Human Resources. We're diving deep into the world of HR and leadership, exploring pivotal elements that shape workplace dynamics while unraveling the impact of positive leadership and sharing the significance of creating healthy workplaces where people can truly thrive. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Story time. For decades, I struggled with low self-esteem. I lacked confidence. When I share that, people are often surprised. I get the response of, "Oh my, you seem so confident." But no, for years I didn't feel as though I was good enough. I recognize that I'm not alone with that feeling. And so many people struggle with a lack of sense of belonging. Today I'm excited to talk about belonging with an expert in the area of DE&I, Regina Lawless, former head of DE&I at Instagram. Regina, I couldn't be happier to have you here today. I am so thrilled and humbled to spend this time with you.
Lori, thank you for having me. I have been so excited to talk to you.
Wonderful. Let's jump right in. Regina, what impresses me most about you is your story. You have quite a story. Why don't you share the highlights with our listeners?
Love it. Love to. So the first part of my story is that I am a Bay Area native. So I was born and raised in Northern California in a little town called East Palo Alto, which most people are not familiar with, but they know neighboring Palo Alto because of Stanford and Silicon Valley. But I grew up in the backyard of the Silicon Valley and all of the affluence that comes with that area, but lived in an area that was very different from that, an area that there was a lot of struggle. So I grew up seeing inequality firsthand. So that was something that I think informed my drive to succeed, because that was what my parents taught me. My parents came from, the rural South. And so all they knew was education, working hard. So that set me on a path to go into the Army Reserve. I did that right out of high school. I ended up going into college after that, and then started my HR career. So I have been an HR practitioner for almost 20 years. And I started at Target right out of college, and then worked my way up the corporate ladder, eventually making my way to Instagram, which parent company was then Facebook, now known as Meta. I ended my corporate career at Meta as the head of DEI at Instagram. And throughout that journey have had, of course, a lot of ups and downs. Got married, started a family. And then most recently, within the last couple of years, tragically lost my husband, which is now, of course, a major part of my story and why I've pivoted to do some other things outside of corporate. So that's a little bit about me and my story.
Thank you for that. And I want to extend my sincerest condolences for your loss. I
Thank
want to go
you.
back to your humble beginnings. I'm a big believer, which is why I focus a lot on the humanness. I don't think we recognize just how impactful our beginnings are. So tell me a little bit more. I know you said your parents came from the South and encouraged education. But tell me a little bit more about that. What were some of the other values that were instilled in you during your childhood that led to the woman you are today?
Oh, goodness. So many. I think one of the things that my parents instilled in me is family. So, what was unique about living in East Palo Alto at the time, this was in the early 80s, it was a predominantly Black community. And so, all of my immediate and extended family lived in the same town. So even though East Palo Alto was going through a lot, there was a lot of violence, there was, drugs. This was during the crack epidemic. So there was a lot of strife going on in that community. But amongst, like, in the middle of that were families like mine. And so that has
Mm,
always been a value of mine. I grew up being able to play with my cousins and be, raised by my aunts and uncles, and so family is really important to me. So that's one value. And then really this value of equity and fairness. So I think that's
mm,
actually how I got into DEI ultimately. HR was the gateway for me to get into DEI, but I always had this sense that I knew very early on that things were not equal for people, that we didn't all start out on a level playing field. And I could see that. My mom used to drive across the county line from East Palo Alto to go do banking or go to supermarkets because we didn't have those basic resources in our community. And so I remember very vividly as a child, and I described this in my upcoming book, that drive from East Palo Alto to Palo Alto, and it was like a night and day difference. And I didn't know why at that, early of an age, but I knew enough to know that things were very, very different for people who looked like me versus, folks that lived in the town next to us. And so that stuck with me. And so I think that's why I fight so hard, both in the corporate arena, but also in my own business now, to create access and opportunity, because I know that we all don't start from the same place.
not starting from the same place. As an HR practitioner, I think that's one of the biggest challenges to convey to leaders. What is a tip or a suggestion that you would have for a leader? You spent time coaching, guiding, and developing leaders to see equity. What's the tip or two? Because I know as a practitioner, I struggle with that. Not everyone sees the differences. And if they don't see and recognize the difference, how do you get them there?
Mm. So, what I encourage for leaders to do is to really get to know their people on an individual level. And I think if you're a leader who's having, hopefully, you are having one on ones with everybody on your team. And if you are taking some time to go beyond the to do list, go beyond the projects, you get to know people. And that's how you start to understand folks' backgrounds, their motivations, their dreams, their goals. And so that's how I would coach leaders. And that's something that I practice as a leader myself. I knew my team. And so I knew what motivated them. I also understood where gaps were. I had a global team. So I knew for some team members coming in, there were barriers beyond what some of my US team members had to deal with, in terms of barriers of, you're operating in a different culture. English is not your first language. So understanding even things like that help you to
Mm.
adapt your level of support for your team. And that also, of course, takes some empathy. But before you get to the empathy, I find just start by just getting to know your folks, and then you can put your empathy hat on and try to put yourself in their shoes.
Well, you know me well, and you said empathy, and I'm all about that. So thank you. But in this privacy first world where we often can't ask certain questions, how do you get there? How do you build that rapport and do it in a way that it doesn't feel intrusive?
Yeah, I always recommend, and again, I practice myself, to ask open ended questions. So when I start any one on one with someone on my team, I just ask, like, how's your weekend? How's your week going? Did you have fun this weekend? Just random or seemingly random open-ended questions. So then I'm not asking a pointed question that would potentially go into a privacy issue or make someone feel uncomfortable. I start by asking just open-ended questions and then allow that person to share what they feel comfortable sharing. And of course, as you build the rapport, as you build the relationship and the trust, people then share more over time. But in the beginning, I just like to ask, you know, how's it going? How was your week last week? Like, you have any special plans this weekend? And just see what they feel comfortable saying.
It doesn't seem like it now, but we did go through a global pandemic when we all thought we would not exist anymore.
Right.
I feel, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, I feel that we did a better job of checking in then because we were told. What are you seeing now? Are we still doing those check-ins?
I don't think we're being as intentional about doing those check-ins. And I fully agree with you. I think that we did do a better job because we were all in isolation. So you almost felt like you had to extend that. Like it was almost like
Mm-hmm.
a virtual wellness check. Like, are you alive over there? Is everything
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
Um, so now that we are back outside, I don't think that we are as attuned to being that intentional about checking in. But I think it's just as necessary, especially since we have this distributed environment where you have some people fully remote, some in the office, some hybrid. I do think that leaders need to make that a regular part of their routine, just to do a check in. On my last team, we were going through a lot of change. And I think that that's a natural time when people are primed to check in more. One of the things that we started doing is having just optional calls for people at the end of the week just to come together and talk. Just 30
Mm.
minutes, just come on and check in. And some people needed that because they feel pretty isolated. Other people are like, no, I'm good. I have my community outside of work. I don't need another call. But offering the option was a great way to have something recurring that created a sense of community.
I miss all the games.
Me
I was
too.
introduced to so many fun virtual games, and I felt
Yes.
during that season so much closer.
Yeah, I
Now,
agree.
I'm lucky enough that I go into an office twice a week. We've got a hybrid environment, but we do have nearly half, if not more than our office is remote. Any
Mm.
suggestions on creating an inclusive culture for a hybrid environment where you have some coming in and some not?
That's the $1 million question, as they say. It takes a lot of intention to create equitable environments when you have people not all in the same, not able to participate in the same ways. And so, kind of going into the pandemic, one of the research studies that I liked, it was from the Neuro Leadership Institute. They had this rule that they came up for their firm, and they were training other firms that if one person is remote, let's say one person has to dial into, Zoom or whatever software you use, then everybody on that call needs to have that same ability to dial in that way, which seems a little extreme. That's a little hard to do when you have some people in office. But what they were, the message they were trying to convey was this kind of one for all. You want to have a way for people to participate kind of on equal footing instead of these side conversations that we know happen today. When you have 3 or 4 people in a conference room, they're having the side chat that the people on, the virtual call can't hear. So that's a little bit tougher to manage, kind of what they recommended. But what stuck for me was that try to be creative and find ways to equalize the experience. So I think even if you still have people in the room and then people virtual, making it so every comment or question can be verbalized, making it so that you're regularly checking in with the people virtually, maybe making everybody chat responses in via chat. So that was one of the tactics that they called out in that research study. They would do these rapid fire, like ask a question and then allow everybody on the call to chat the answer in. So then you're being inclusive, you have a response from everyone. And that also helps your folks that are more introverted, maybe whatever the primary language is that's being used, maybe that's not their primary language. So I think it allows for more input from people than just the two or three people that are usually most vocal in any given meeting.
I love the suggestion of encouraging everyone to throw their comments and thoughts in chat. Thank you
I
for
loved
that.
that. Yeah, I thought that was a really cool way to encourage participation.
I'd like to pivot because I heard you've got a book coming out. Tell me a
I
little bit about the book. What's the premise behind the book?
Yes, I do have a book coming out on February 6th. It's called Do You. The subtitle is A Journey of Success, Loss, and Learning to Live a More Meaningful Life. And so the premise of the book is this idea that we are sold this idealistic view of the American dream. We are told
Mm,
that we need to put our heads down and work really hard, and that will get us all the things that we are supposed to want in this society. It will give us the success. It will fulfill all of our dreams. And I did all of that. I worked really hard.
hmm
I achieved, an executive level role at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I had a nice house in the suburbs. I had the husband, the kid, the dog, the all the things, but I wasn't fulfilled. And it
mm,
wasn't until my husband died suddenly that I had the time and space to really sit with myself and think
mm,
about what I wanted for the rest of my life, and if what all this striving I had been doing was really for. And of course, there was a lot of healing that had to happen on my part. And I talk through that journey in the book, the first dealing with my own grief. But then over about an 18-month period of trial and error, I realized that there were 5 things that I did to move me from devastation to living a thriving, beautiful,
mm,
what I call meaningful life. And so, those 5 things, first, I had to reconnect with my heart because
yeah.
I had been raised to again put my head down, suck it up. Like you get over adversity, just you keep it moving. And so I had learned to suppress so much emotion, so much feeling, so much of my own needs and desires. So through therapy, through journaling, through meditation, through lots of different activities, I was able to get back in touch with my emotions. So, reconnecting with my heart. The second thing I had to do was restore my body. So, I found that my nervous system was a wreck. Grief is a very physical experience that people don't often realize. So I started doing yoga and other types of movement to get back in touch with my body. The third thing I did was reframe my beliefs. We talked about me being raised by parents who came from the rural South. And so it was all about hard work. And for me, that turned into working myself to exhaustion, working myself to burnout more than once in my
Mm,
career. And so I had to reprogram. I had to reprogram my thoughts about rest and people pleasing and self sacrifice. I had to reframe those. And so I talk about some of the ways that I did that. The fourth thing I did was renew my spirit. So
mm.
I learned how to start living more for me and honoring my desires. And in the book, I talk about these 3 pleasure principles that came out of this period. And one of them is say many more no's to make space for the juicy yeses. So
Ooh, I like that.
that's one of my favorite ones, actually. So things like that came about that I was like, okay, that's about setting healthy boundaries. You can't do everything,
Mm.
nor should you. So you have to say many more no's, and that frees you up to do what really lights you up, which for me was writing this book. So I had to say a lot of
Mm.
no's to make space in my life to write this book. And then the last thing, the fifth kind of thing that I discovered that I did was reinvent my routines. And so
Mm.
it's great when you try different things, and a lot of growth and change is trial and error, but to really transform you have to make those things habits. So I had to figure out, like, oh, I like this, I don't like that, this makes sense for me, that doesn't. And then I settled into new habits to carry what worked for me forward. So yeah, so that
I
is
love
essentially what
it.
the book is.
Do you?
Do you? Yeah.
I love it. What I heard was heart, body, beliefs, spirit, routine.
That you summed it up beautifully. Those are the five elements.
Wonderful. Closing us out, Regina, what is the big message you want to leave our listeners?
Well, no coincidence. The message is related to my book, and it really is to do you. And by that, what I mean by that is really going inward, tapping into your own inner knowing. We all have the ability to really feel what's right for us. I believe we all have discernment. We all have that inner voice. We all can create the life that we want, but it really takes us going inward. We live in a very busy, very noisy world, and it's easy to get caught up and go through the motions. I feel like 10 years of my life passed by in a blink, and I can't even tell you what I did. So
Mm-hmm.
we get
Mm-hmm.
so caught up in doing and not feeling and being. So
Mm.
yeah, so do you, to me, is getting reconnected with yourself, and that will be your compass. That will be your guide for the life that you really want and deserve.
Well, Regina, it's been my pleasure and my honor to have this conversation with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning into Working Forward. If you like what you hear, please share it with others and make sure you're following the show to not miss an episode. We are available anywhere you get your audio. See you next time.